Some states carry stories that are remembered, others carry secrets that were never supposed to be told. Iowa is one of those places that wears its silence like a mask. On the surface, it is endless cornfields, quiet towns, and rivers that move without hurry. But if you listen long enough, if you stand still in the right place, you will feel it, the ground beneath. Your feet is not just dirt, it is a vault. A vault filled with voices, doors, and tunnels that were meant to stay sealed forever. Beneath the farmland, beneath the calm rivers, beneath the forests where the wind never seems to die, something else waits. Things that were buried not because they were forgotten, but because someone wanted them hidden. The truth about Iowa is not in the postcards or the highway signs. It is in the abandoned mines that were bricked shut, in the tunnels beneath cemeteries that still echo with cries, in the lakes that swallowed entire towns but never digested them. It is in the forests where silence does not bring peace but a warning, where even the sound of your own footsteps feels borrowed, as though someone or something is pacing with you. And sometimes it is not above you at all. Sometimes it is below. Hollow ground that hums, footsteps that rise from underneath, whispers that press against the soil like breath against glass. These are not bedtime stories. They are not just old legends locals tell to scare outsiders. These are documented records, police reports, witness statements, geological surveys, places you can visit if you dare. Places you were never meant to find. They are out there still tangible, standing in plain sight if you know where not to look. Imagine for a moment walking into the woods on a quiet night. You hear the usual things, an owl, the crunch of leaves beneath your shoes, until everything stops. No birds, no wind, just silence so heavy it presses against your chest. Then, faintly, you hear it, footsteps matching yours, but not behind you, beneath you. What do you do in that moment? Do you run, or do you freeze, praying that the ground does not give way? Because in Iowa, silence is never empty. So before we open the door to these places, lock yours. Pull the blanket closer. Turn off the lights and listen carefully. Because after this, you will never see Iowa the same way again. Mystery number 1. The Van Meter Visitor. The first shadow that slipped through Iowa's quiet farmland came not from the trees, not from the rivers, but from the sky itself. Van Meter, a small farming town that should have been just another dot on the map, became something else entirely one September night in 1903. The story has been told in fragments, dismissed as hysteria, filed away as folklore. But the people who saw it were not children whispering ghost stories. They were businessmen, store owners, pillars of the town. And what they described was not something the human mind invents in idle imagination. It began with light, not the warm glow of a lantern, not the flicker of a torch carried down a road. This light moved differently sharp, cutting through the night as though it did not belong to any flame. Eugene Griffith, a respected businessman, saw it first. Walking home after dark, he noticed it drifting above the rooftops, strange and deliberate. At first, he thought someone was walking with a lantern on a pole, but when it slid silently through the sky and passed directly over his head, he froze. The air tore with the sound of fabric ripping, and in the space between heartbeat and breath, he realized it was not light being carried. The light was coming from its head. What hovered above him was not human. He would later describe it as nearly 8 feet tall, with wings that stretched wide and leathery like some prehistoric beast. A thick neck hunched forward, and a stench so vile it turned his stomach. Not just rotten something worse. A sulfur reek, like the earth itself had exhaled something dead and buried. The following night, it returned. This time, it perched brazenly on the rooftop of the town's hardware store. Clarence Dunn, the owner, did not hesitate. Armed with a shotgun, he raised it and fired point blank. The recoil echoed through the quiet town, but what came after was worse than silence. The creature did not fall. Instead, it let out a sound so unnatural that, even recalling it decades later, Dunn described it as metallic shrieking, the sound of steel grinding against steel layered with something alive inside it. A sound that made the hair on the back of every man's neck stand up. By morning, the evidence was undeniable. Huge, three-toed footprints gouged into the dirt, prints so deep they seemed pressed by something impossibly heavy. They made plaster casts that still exist today, proof that something had been there, though no official explanation was ever given. And that night, when townsfolk gathered with rifles and shotguns, waiting for the thing to show itself, again they fired into it, but their bullets had no effect. It moved through the town as though the weapons were toys, drifting from rooftop to rooftop, claiming the streets, spreading that choking smell of sulfur and decay, as though to remind them it was not flesh and blood they were facing. And then, as suddenly as it had come, it vanished. Not into the sky, not into the trees, but into the ground itself. Witnesses swore it descended into an abandoned mine shaft on the edge of town. By dawn, dozens of men had gathered. They marched with rifles, shotguns, and even dynamite, determined to end it. They surrounded the shaft, waiting for the light to return, and just before the first rays of morning broke, it emerged again, but this time it was not alone. Another followed, smaller, but nearly identical, both spreading their wings with that terrible sound of metal tearing apart. They beat the air and lifted into the clouds until they disappeared, leaving the townsfolk stunned and powerless. The mine shaft was sealed. Bricks, concrete, stones, anything that would hold the darkness inside. And no one opened it again. Time passed, the story faded, but the earth never truly buried it. To this day, the shaft is there, overgrown, forgotten by maps, but not by those who live nearby. Locals say that sometimes, when the night is quiet and the wind shifts in the wrong direction, you can hear it again. A hum from beneath the ground, the metallic screech of knives being sharpened against stone, as if wings still stir in the darkness below. And then came 2013, when a team of paranormal researchers brought ground-penetrating radar to the site. What they found was worse than silence. Beneath the surface lay vast, hollow spaces, empty caverns where no records of mines had ever existed. Cavities with no history, no explanation, as though the earth itself had been carved out by something unseen. They left without digging further. No one has dared since. The official word is hysteria, a trick of the dark, imagination. But that is the story people tell when they do not want the truth to spread. Because sometimes, the ground beneath you is not just hollow, it is breathing. And if you stand in the wrong spot, you will feel it waiting, wings folded, eyes glowing in the dark, ready to rise again. Mystery number 2, screams beneath Oakland Cemetery. The winged thing of Van Meter vanished into the earth, but Iowa's secrets do not stay in one place. Some crawl back into the mines, others sink into the water, but a few remain just beneath our feet, close enough that you can hear them if you are unlucky enough to stand in the right spot. Not far from the cornfields, there is a cemetery where grief was supposed to rest quietly in stone and soil. Instead, it echoes, it multiplies, it becomes unbearable. This place is Oakland Cemetery, a beautiful stretch of Victorian marble angels and weathered headstones, famous for its statues and its history. But it is not the Black Angel, the cursed monument locals whisper about that unsettles those who walk its paths. It is what lies below. In the late 1800s, when Iowa winters froze the ground solid, digging graves became impossible. And so, beneath Oakland, they built tunnels. Narrow corridors, brick-lined vaults where the dead could be stored until spring. It was meant to be practical, respectful. But from the moment the first stones were laid, the earth seemed unwilling to keep silent. Workers spoke of strange drafts in the sealed chambers, of whispers that never matched the voices of those beside them. And then came the winter of 1898. At first, it was only noises faint, dismissible. A sigh, a shifting echo, the settling of stone. But then, the crying began. Men working late swore they heard it through the walls. Not faint and far, but close, as though someone stood on the other side of the brick. One worker pressed his ear to the cold surface, and what he heard stopped him from returning the next day. Fists, pounding, desperate, rhythmic, human. Something alive in a chamber that should have held only the dead. When they broke open the nearest vault, there was nothing. No body disturbed, no cracks in the walls, only silence and dust. But the pounding did not stop. It moved wall to wall, room to room, like something trapped was fleeing deeper, always one step ahead of the living. By 1907, the decision was made. The tunnels were sealed permanently, brick and concrete poured until the network was forgotten, or at least meant to be. But cemeteries remember what people try to erase. In 2011, more than a century later, a group of amateur explorers found an old maintenance shaft still open enough to lower equipment. They dropped a microphone into the dark, and what came back was not silence. At first, only a low hum, the kind you hear deep in caves where the air itself vibrates. Then, faint but clear enough to make their blood run cold. A voice. Not a whisper, not a groan words. It is still here. Help. The last thing the recorder captured was a scream, raw and human, before the audio cut to static. By the next morning, the shaft was sealed, welded shut. No explanation, no warning. The city says the tunnels do not exist anymore. But in 2015, investigators brought ground-penetrating radar. What they found contradicted every official statement. Beneath the cemetery were hollow cavities, irregular, stretching in patterns that do not match any maps. In one section, something worse appeared. A heat signature, not mechanical, not animal. Shaped like a human, moving slowly, as though it were pacing the dark chambers that no one was supposed to enter again. Walk through Oakland Cemetery at night, and locals will tell you what to expect. Not silence, chains dragging over gravel when no one is near. Footsteps that follow yours along the paths, always half a beat behind. A distant knocking, always 3 taps, always from just below where you stand. Sometimes even whispers float up through the soil. Words too broken to catch, but close. Enough to make your chest tighten. The official story says it is the wind, that old trees creak, that the soil shifts. But the men who once built those tunnels are long gone, and the walls they sealed are still there, pulsing with whatever was left inside. The earth can be filled with brick and stone, but sound finds its way out. And sometimes grief does not stay buried. Mystery number 3, the forgotten town beneath Lake Red Rock. Some secrets are locked in tunnels, others sealed behind stone, but some are buried in water, where the surface looks calm while entire histories drown beneath. Not far from the cemetery's echoes lies Lake Red Rock, the largest lake in Iowa, shimmering under the sun as though it holds nothing but fish and drifting boats. But what few realize is that beneath those waters rests a town, a place that once had streets, houses, schools, and a heartbeat of its own. In the early 1960s, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers needed to control flooding along the Des Moines River. Their solution was a dam. Simple, efficient, necessary. But the cost was entire lives uprooted. The town of Red Rock was sacrificed, not piece by piece, but all at once. Families were told to leave. Some homes were dismantled, burned, or carted away. Others were abandoned to their fate, standing as walls and roofs waiting to be swallowed. Cemeteries were relocated in part, but not all the markers were claimed. Bridges, sidewalks, staircases, some were left intact. And then the floodgates closed. Water surged, and the town vanished. At least, that is what people thought. Because water does not erase, it preserves. And every so often, when drought grips Iowa and the lake recedes, pieces of Red Rock claw their way back into daylight. Locals tell of sidewalks that run straight into the water, cut-off foundations, the sharp lines of staircases that climb upward to nowhere before plunging into the lake. Gravestones too have submerged, tilted, broken, marking the resting places of those who were never moved. But it is not just what you see, it is what you hear. Fishermen swear they have listened to church bells ringing faintly beneath the waves, long after the church itself was submerged. Others claim to have heard children laughing, splashes from the shallows when no one else was there. In 2012, during one of the worst droughts Iowa had ever seen, a kayaker ventured further out on the exposed shoreline. What he found was not just rubble. It was a structure. Smooth walls forming a perfect corner, a doorway leading straight down into the lake's depths. He swore that as he drifted closer, a woman's voice began to hum. Not a song, not words, just a sound soft, rising from the dark water. He spun his boat, paddling hard, and behind him he swore he heard splashing, like something keeping pace just out of sight. He marked the place and returned the next day, only to find the water had risen, swallowing it again. Locals say the lake does not reveal everything at once. It teases. It shows you just enough to remind you that red rock is still there, waiting beneath the surface. Divers who've gone down report their equipment, failing radios cut out, compasses spin, lights flicker. More than once, divers have returned early, shaken and pale, refusing to speak of what they saw. Kayakers at dusk whisper of pale lights glowing under the surface, moving slowly as if they belonged to lanterns carried through the drowned streets. And in 2018, satellite images taken during a record drought revealed something even harder to deny. Shapes beneath the water lines too straight, corners too sharp to be natural. Grid-like patterns, the ghost of streets where families once walked, where children once played. Proof that the bones of red rock still stand, trapped under the lake's surface like insects in amber. The Army Corps insists there is nothing dangerous down there. No structures remain, no risk to the public, just water, silt, and fish. But locals do not believe it. They know that when the water drops too low, the lake gives back fragments of what it devoured, and sometimes something comes with them. The mines may hold things with wings, the cemeteries things that scream. But the drowned town carries silence of another kind. The silence of bells that no longer hang, of footsteps that should be impossible, of laughter rising through the water like bubbles that never burst. Mystery number 4, the Howling Forest of Blackhawk. Water can hide entire towns, but the woods hide something more dangerous, because in the trees, silence itself becomes a predator. When you step into Blackhawk State Park, the world feels ordinary at first. Trails cut through groves of oak and pine. Birds chatter. Leaves scatter under your boots. In daylight, it feels safe, even beautiful. But when the sun drops behind the ridge, something changes. The forest holds its breath. The air thickens, sound vanishes, and the quiet begins to press against you. That is when people say the howling starts. Not from wolves, not from the wind, but from something that knows your name. The first official report came in 1947. A man hiking alone phoned for help, claiming someone had been following him. His voice was frantic, his words clipped by panic. By the time authorities arrived, he was gone. His car was still parked at the trailhead, his gear untouched, but there were no footprints to follow. He never came back. After that, stories began to grow like roots, spreading through generations of locals who warned each other never to stay too long after dusk. The forest does not stalk you all at once. It begins gently, footsteps that fall exactly with yours, as though the ground is echoing your stride. Every time you stop, the sound stops too. At first, you convince yourself it is just nerves. But then the whispers begin. Not words you can make out. Not familiar voices. Just murmurs too close to dismiss. Campers report hearing children's laughter weaving through the trees, the crying of a woman just beyond the glow of a campfire, the wet rasp of heavy breathing that circles without ever showing its source. One of the most chilling nights came in 1992. A group of college students decided to camp near the southern ridge. At exactly 2:13 in the morning, one of them unzipped the tent. He said he heard someone outside calling his name. The voice was perfect. Same tone, same inflection, it was his own voice. He walked into the darkness and never came back. The others followed minutes later, calling for him, their flashlights cutting between trunks, and that is when they saw it. A figure standing perfectly still, tall, too thin, blacker than the night itself. No face, no features, just a shape. When the beams of their lights struck it, it vanished. 2 of them never returned to the park again. The third refuses to speak about what he saw. Locals have a saying, if the forest feels too quiet, you are not alone. You are being hunted. It is a phrase passed down, almost a warning disguised as folklore. Hikers describe a moment, almost ritualistic, when everything stops. The birds fall silent, the wind dies, even the crunch of your steps seems absorbed by the soil. And in that suffocating stillness, the howling begins. Not from outside you, but from somewhere deeper, low, guttural, vibrating in your chest, as if the sound were coming from inside your own body. In 2017, an experienced outdoorsman captured audio that still defies explanation. At first, the recording picks up a deep hum, low and steady, like the rumble of something immense just beyond hearing. Then a voice breaks through 3 words, flat and commanding, "Stop walking." Before he could even react, the microphone overloads with a howl, so loud and so close that the static nearly blows out the recording. He reported footsteps circling him in the dark, rapid and closing in, though nothing appeared in his light. He left the forest that night and never returned. Park rangers do not patrol Blackhawk after sundown anymore. Officially, it is for safety, to prevent accidents. Unofficially, it is because too many have heard things they can't explain. Some say the voices belong to the displaced souls of those driven out when the land was first taken. Others believe it is older than history itself, something tied to the soil and trees, something that does not want to be seen but loves to be heard. Whatever the truth is, locals agree on one rule. Above all, if you ever hear the forest call your name, no matter how familiar the voice sounds, do not answer. Not here. Not in Blackhawk. Mystery number 5. The sealed doors of the Villisca Axe Murder House. The forest whispers, but some horrors never leave the trees. They move into the walls of houses, into the boards that creak at night, into the very air that clings to a room. In the small town of Villisca, Iowa, there stands a house that is more than just a structure of wood and nails. It is a wound that never healed. Some homes hold memories. This one holds the night of June 10th, 1912, a night so violent, so incomprehensible that the entire state has carried its shadow ever since. Inside those walls, an entire family was slaughtered. 6 children, 2 adults, all murdered with the blunt and jagged end of an axe. No fingerprints, no footprints, no suspect ever brought to justice. The case grew cold, but the house never did. From that night onward, it has been alive with the sounds of what happened there. The official record is simple, a tragedy. But anyone who has stepped inside knows the story is still unfolding. Visitors tell of footsteps pacing between rooms, steady and deliberate, as though the killer never left. Doors slam without wind. Shadows stretch and move when no one is there. And always, the whispers, thin voices, children's voices saying words too chilling to ignore. He is back. Imagine standing in the kitchen and hearing that, the echo of little ones who should have been laid to rest over a century ago. The house itself remembers. The floors are scarred where blood once seeped into wood grain, scrubbed until the stains faded but never disappeared completely. Paranormal investigators describe a heaviness, a pressure that makes breathing difficult, as though the very walls are leaning inward. In 2004, one investigator chose to spend the night alone. At exactly 2:17 a.m., his recorder captured footsteps slow, dragging across the upstairs floorboards. Then came a voice, calm, low and chilling. Don't open the door. Minutes later, staff found him unconscious on the floor. He left Iowa and never returned. But the house does not just replay the past, it tries to finish it. In 2014, a tourist who had booked an overnight stay stabbed himself in the chest. Later, he told authorities that the house had spoken to him, that it had commanded him. "Finish what was started," he said. "It told me to finish it." He survived, but he left the house and never spoke of it again. Filmmakers, too, have tried to capture what lingers there. More than one documentary has ended with drained batteries, cameras failing mid-scene, audio tracks filled with nothing but the sound of heavy breathing pressed against the microphone, breathing when no one was in the room. Guides refused to speak about it directly, but many warned guests not to provoke, not to mock, not to test the house, because Villisca does not forgive. The most unsettling detail lies upstairs in the children's room. In one corner sits a closet, sealed tight. The door is nailed shut, painted over, locked from the outside. No one opens it, not guides, not researchers, not even the owners, because the last time someone tried, they heard knocking from within. Paranormal devices spike near it without explanation, sudden bursts of EMF where no electricity runs, faint voices whispering from the wood, words like hide and don't breathe, punctuated by the unmistakable scrape of something heavy dragged across the floor. The official story insists the house is only history, but history does not knock back, and this house has never stopped knocking. Mystery number 6. The Lost Children of Forest City Cemetery. Some horrors stay inside houses, trapped behind nailed doors. Others linger beneath the open sky where no walls contain them and no locks can hold them. Just beyond the edge of Forest City lies a cemetery the town pretends not to see. Overgrown, unmarked, left to the trees and the shifting earth, it is known locally as the Children's Field, a name whispered with unease, because since the early 1900s, that is where the ones who could not be explained were buried. The records are gone, church logs vanished, grave maps incomplete, and headstones eroded far faster than stone should ever weather. What remains is a patch of land where no one truly knows who rests beneath the grass, and where some graves have no names at all. To walk through it is to walk through silence, but it is not the silence of peace. For decades, people have reported children darting between the trees, small figures that appear for only a second before dissolving back into shadow. Their laughter is faint, carried on the wind, sometimes distant, sometimes suddenly right behind you. They never approach, they never speak directly, but they are always watching. In 1979, a young boy disappeared near the southern woods. Search teams combed the area, finding no trace of him except a trail of small barefoot prints. The prints led from the path to the cemetery, each one pressed clearly into the dirt. But then, mid-stride, they stopped. No drag marks, no scattering, nothing but the abrupt ending of a life's trace, as though the earth had swallowed him whole. His body was never found. In 2003, 2 hikers wandering the edge of the cemetery reported something that still chills the locals. They heard a girl crying for help, her voice soft, pleading, fragile. They followed the sound past the last visible headstone, deeper into the trees, until the path itself vanished. There was no child, no trail. Only a row of tiny handprints pressed into the soil, perfect and deliberate, leading nowhere before fading into nothing. Phones die in this place. Cameras refuse to work. Recordings come back not with voices, but with breathing wet, close, human. At night, some hear the sound of digging, the steady scrape of earth being shifted just beneath their feet, as though someone, or something, is trying to claw its way back up. Others swear they have seen mounds of earth move as though stirred from below, though when they return with others, the ground is undisturbed. The town avoids the cemetery. No fences mark it, no signs acknowledge it, no effort has been made to restore the graves. Officially, it is forgotten. Unofficially, it is avoided. Because the people who live nearby understand something the rest of the state does not. Some graves do not hold the dead still. Some graves keep watch. The grass may grow wild, the headstones may fade, but the ground remembers, the trees remember. And when night falls, the laughter always comes back soft, fleeting, too far to catch, too close to ignore. You can follow it, but you will never reach it. Because in Forest City, the children never truly left. Some things fly above the rooftops, wings tearing the air like fabric. Others scream from beneath cemeteries, pounding against walls that should never echo. Entire towns vanish under lakes, but their bells and voices drift up through the water when the droughts come. In the forests, silence becomes a trap, whispering back in voices that should be yours. Houses like the one in Villisca never let go of what happened inside, their doors closing on their own as if the killer still walks their halls. And in Forest City, the laughter of children who were buried without names still circles the trees, always just out of reach, always waiting for someone to follow. Iowa looks simple from the outside fields of corn, rivers that bend slowly across the land, quiet towns where nothing seems to change. But beneath that image lies a different map, a hidden one, a map of places you were never supposed to find, mines sealed with brick, tunnels welded shut, lakes swallowing whole communities, trails where the air dies into silence, cemeteries where records are gone, but voices remain. Each one locked away because someone long ago decided it was safer not to know, but the ground remembers, the water remembers, the houses, the trees, the graves, they all remember. And sometimes, when the wind shifts, when the water drops, when the silence becomes too heavy, they remind us. A flicker of light where no lantern should be, a voice whispering your name in the woods, a door slamming shut, though no one touched it, laughter echoing through the night. These are not legends to the people who live near them, they are warnings. The official stories will tell you hysteria, superstition, accidents. But Iowa's secrets do not fade when written off. They wait. They stay buried just long enough for us to stop looking, and then they rise again, through tunnels, through water, through silence. So lock your doors, check the ground beneath your feet, and listen carefully the next time the air goes still. Because in Iowa, not every mystery stays buried. Some are still moving in the dark, waiting for someone curious enough or unlucky enough to find them. Tell me, out of all the places we have uncovered tonight, which one haunts you the most? And if you dare, which state should we explore next?